this enchanted forest, my heart sings free.
The king turned and could see Danso staring at Botwe. "Do you know who he is?" the king asked Danso in a raged tone. Danso immediately wiped off the single tear that was rolling down his cheek. He turned to the king. He looked at Botwe, then turned to the king again. "I don't know him, my king," Danso answered. "Better," the king said, and walked back inside the palace. Danso sat back on the bench outside the palace. He rested his forehead on his palm and was filled with regret what he has just gotten himself into. Danso had always hated being a hunter. He believes that hunters are not as rich as businessmen and high-class farmers. As a hunter, he never had the luck of bringing home a good meat. He only caught bigger meat whenever he went with Botwe. Danso felt like hunting wasn't his luck and wouldn't fetch him enough gold as he desires. He had planned on telling his friend that he was about to give up hunting, but when Botwe came back with the news of a strange singing beauty who had healed him, Danso immediately knew he had hit the jackpot. Danso knew his friend Botwe was a very lucky and honest person, so he immediately believed him. All through that night, Danso couldn't sleep. He kept on thinking about how he was going to take the singing beauty hostage and use her to make money. After so many thoughts, Danso knew his friend Botwe will never agree to what he was going to ask, so he started trying out other options. Someone came to Danso's mind, King Kwesi of Tunini Kingdom. He had heard about the king's meanness and wealth, so he decided he was going to sell the singing beauty to the king if it be true. Very early that morning, Danso woke up and started preparing his gun. He was really anxious to confirm if Efwa was really true. When he finally saw Efwa, he was so happy that it was really true. That same day after they got back, Danso advised Botwe not to go after Efwa till the third day. Immediately Botwe left for his house, Danso took off immediately to go meet the king of Tunini Kingdom. When he arrived, he told the king about the singing beauty who was living in the bush. The king sent his guards with Danso very early that morning to go bring the singing beauty. When Danso arrived in front of Efwa's little hut, he knocked on the door. He told Efwa he was hurt and needed her help. Efwa considered the fact that Botwe was so kind to her. She opened the door for Danso. The king's guards went in immediately and took her hostage. Danso started searching her hut, looking for answers to know if Efwa was a goddess or just an ordinary being. Danso went back with the king's guards to the village of Tunini. The king, who was very strict, told Danso that before he would be paid the amount of gold they agreed, he has to see Efwa's powers. Danso decided to go back home to his friend so he wouldn't suspect anything. On the third day, when Botwe had come back with the news that Efwa had disappeared, he already knew what happened. So he tried convincing his friend not to go in search of Efwa, yet Botwe insisted and kept on searching for Efwa. On the third day, Danso decided to play the role of a friend again by asking to join his friend in search of Efwa. If only those girls had not been gossiping out aloud, his friend wouldn't have heard about the king of Tunini. He asked Botwe to promise him he wasn't going to go after Efwa. He knew King Kwesi wasn't a merciful one and could kill him. After Botwe had left, he traveled back to the village of Tunini to take the gold and silver he had asked for from the king. Words had spread about the king in possession of a singing beauty who healed all manner of sickness. A rich man came with his son who was seriously sick. Danso was waiting for Efwa to sing and heal the young. Efwa had refused to sing and she was being whipped by the king's guards before Botwe walked in on them. He never planned for Botwe to get hurt. He never knew Botwe was going to break the promise he made to him and come looking for Efwa. Danso didn't know what else to do. He was hurt his friend was going to lose his life because of his selfishness. Efwa was in her cage and shedding tears after hearing the king's decision to kill Botwe. She saw Botwe was ready to lay down his life for her, unlike his friend who betrayed her trust. Efwa was so hurt, so was feeling both physical and emotional pains. She was lost in tears when the sweet hands of sleep took her off. The next morning, as ordered by the king, Botwe was being untied from the tree. It was time for him to be killed. "I'll sing, I'll sing," Efwa shouted from inside her cage, with tears streaming down her cheeks. Botwe was already looking very weak with the bruises all over his body. "Tie him back to the tree and get the man and his sick son," the king ordered. Few minutes later, the man and his sick son were brought to the palace. Efwa started humming melodiously. Then she started singing. Something happened that left everyone present in awe. As Efwa sang, the son of the rich man got healed. Not only the son of the rich man, but also Botwe's bruises were all gone, and it was as if he was never whipped. Efwa, who was shedding tears, became filled with so much joy. The king, being so astonished, stood up from his chair. He hasn't seen anything of such before. He stared at everyone who got healed, including Botwe. Then he noticed something. With the way Botwe was smiling at Efwa, he could see love in his eyes. Two young people in love are the hardest to ever separate. King Kwesi wasn't ready to take those chances. cut off his head and throw his body into the forest, the king said in a loud voice, pointing at Botwe. Efwa tried running towards Botwe but was held down by the guards as she cried bitterly. King Kwesi's guard picked up the very sharp cutlass and walked towards Botwe, who was firmly tied against a tree.
"Stop it, please," a voice said in a loud and then calm tone. King Kwesi turned and it was Danso who spoke. "How dare you? Who do you think you are to stop my order?" the king thundered. "He's my friend. I know who he is. Please spare him. Please, you can keep all the gold I promised me. Just let him be. I can't live with the guilt of his death. I can't be behind the death of my friend," Danso pleaded with King Kwesi in a sober voice. Everyone was surprised and all turned to look at Danso. "You lied to me. You told me you never knew who he was," King Kwesi said, looking at Danso with fire in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I lied. I never knew you would kill him. Please forgive us and we will never step foot into your kingdom ever again," Danso pleaded with the king. "I'll pretend this never happened," King Kwesi said to Danso with a cruel smile. "Remove his head from his neck," he ordered his guards again, moving away from where Danso was standing and going back to his seat. One of the king's guards was standing beside Danso with a rifle. Danso overpowered him and took the rifle from him. "Stop right there and drop the cutlass before I blow his brains out," Danso said to the guard with the cutlass while pointing the gun on the king's head. "How dare you? How dare you point a gun at me? Do you know the gravity of your offense? Do you know the sacrilege you are committing?" King Kwesi asked in rage. Everyone kept staring at Danso in astonishment as he held the rifle against the king. Danso kept pointing the rifle at the king and taking steps back slowly and carefully. He picked up a knife and cut the ropes tied on Botwe with one hand while still pointing the other at the king. "Let's go, Botwe," Danso said to Botwe after cutting him loose from the tree. "But we can't leave her behind," Botwe said, pointing at Efwa whose tears were streaming down her cheeks. "We will come back for her," Danso whispered softly into the ears of Botwe. "I'm so sorry. I never meant any of this," Danso said to King Kwesi. He dropped the rifle on the ground and ran off with Botwe. "Shoot them down," the king ordered in anger. His guards kept shooting sporadically as Botwe and Danso disappeared into the bush. The guards then ran after them. Botwe and Danso kept running deeper into the bush. After running for a long time, Danso suddenly stopped running. Botwe too stopped to know why his friend was lagging behind. "What is the matter, Danso? Let's go before they catch up with us," Botwe said to his friend. Danso fell to the floor while breathing heavily. Botwe ran back to him. He tried lifting Danso up and he noticed his hands were wet and cold. He checked and it was blood. He turned Danso and saw he had been shot twice. He had been bleeding all those while they were running. Botwe tried to pluck some leaves to stop the bleeding, but Danso stopped him. He held his hand and drew him back, shaking his head from left to right. "I want to spend my last moment with you, my friend," Danso said, trying to smile. No, you won't die. Let's go back to Efwa. She'll sing and you'll get healed. Please, just hang on," Botwe said with tears rolling down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, my friend. I broke the trust you had for me. I betrayed you." Blood rolled out from Danso's mouth as he spoke. He coughed and blood mixed with saliva poured on Botwe. "Will you ever forgive? Will you find a place in your heart to forgive me?" Danso asked Botwe, and a tear rolled down the side of his eye. "Shh! Stop talking too much," Botwe said with tears rolling down his cheeks. Some rustlings were heard in the bush, and it was the king's guards. They were moving towards Danso and Botwe's direction. Go, get out from here," Danso said to Botwe with a smile. Botwe stood up in tears. He stared at his dying friend for a while and ran off. Before the king's guards will get to where Danso was, he had already given off the ghost. They carried his body back to the village and showed the body to the king. The king was furious that they only caught Danso and not Botwe. Efwa saw the dead body of Danso and tears rolled down her cheeks. She knew Danso had just sacrificed his life for Botwe. He must really love his friend a lot, Efwa thought to herself as the tears kept streaming down her cheeks. The king noticed Efua was crying because of Danso. Then something occurred to the king. Maybe the singing beauty's song may be able to raise the dead. He came down from his royal seat, which was kept outside the palace. He walked towards where Efua was. Why are you crying for this fellow? He was the one that ratted and sold you out. Why are you wasting your tears on him? Okay, if you really care for him that much, then sing. Sing and let your song bring him back to life, the king said cunningly. Efua stared at the king for a while. Then she looked at Danso, who was lying down lifeless on the ground. She stood up, wiped her tears, and started humming a song.